Good morning or good afternoon for wherever you're watching from. Welcome to my channel. I'm happy to have you here today. Of course, I'm Joey Bugeaud. I'm a Vedic astrologer, Ayurvedic life coach, yoga nidra instructor. I do all kinds of fun things. So you can check out my website, www.joeybugeaud.com. And I am delighted to be here today with someone who I respect immensely. She's just a fantastic soul. She has such a beautiful, beautiful energy, and she has such an interesting life journey. Dr. Andrea Deerheart. She is the founder of the HeartWay, which is a nonprofit organization in the US that helps support people and families of people that are in transition from this world into the next world. And I just thought it would be a fantastic conversation to have here today. And it's just my delight to welcome Dr. Deerheart. Welcome so much for coming here today.
Oh, thank you. I'm so touched by your introduction. It's an honor and a delight. I want to add one little thing from what you mentioned. You said US, and I want you to know I don't want to leave out my Canadian friends because we have clients all over the world. So we're there to support. So the Canadians can also get support if they're called after listening a little bit to this, and just want to make sure that that service is available.
That's fantastic. Well, you see, I just learned something new. So so that's great to know. And I'm sure we'll have quite a few Canadian folks watching today. I wanted to start off by chatting a little bit more so people could get to know you, the people who don't know you, about your background and life journey and what eventually led you to found the HeartWay.
Well, how much time do we have? As you all know, we walk so many roads in our lifetime. And I have a quick, cute little saying that I use personally and professionally that's so helpful. We always want foresight. We always want to know what's going to happen and how to make our decisions and what road we should take. But we learn in hindsight. So our stories really our narratives, we have all these narratives that we create, really come together in hindsight. So in hindsight, I can plot out some of the roads that brought me to this moment. But I think the pivotal point in my life was really as a little girl. I was very, very afraid of death. I would say terrorized of death. I can remember as a little girl going under the covers, taking my dog because I didn't want to die alone. And I pull the covers over and I try to imagine what death was like. I wanted to figure this out because I was so scared. I don't know, maybe I last 30 seconds till I was suffocating under the covers. And but it continued to deepen the darkness of what I thought death was. It was scary. It was hot. It was dark. And it was empty. And I grew up with that anxiety. And that was coupled with a family with lots of death as a child with heart disease. And so everybody was dying around me as well, but I wasn't allowed to see them in the hospital. I wasn't allowed to go to the funerals, and it wasn't talked about. So that exploded my fear of death. Well, if nobody's talking about it, this has got to be horrific, is really what I carried forward. That's probably the initiation of having all the services we have, like the Death Cafe and different workshops, to help people have a safe place to have the conversation, have a place for their fears to be contained. So I muddled through childhood, but I had a lot of anxiety. And when you're so fearful of death, you do everything you can to not let death touch you. And the things that I did was live a very safe life. It also inspired, though, 35 years of nutritional studies, Ayurvedic studies, psychology, the self-helps, wellness, exercise. Became a vegetarian very early so that I could stay healthy and nothing would happen to me, so I wouldn't have to face that death. Then as I grew and I graduated my undergraduate program in a very unrelated field of marketing, but as sociology as well, I started working in the computer industry in the 80s when that was really kind of a boom. That wasn't a fit. And I left a company. I was working back east, came back to California where I'm a native. And I decided to volunteer for a hospice. I kind of have that personality of when I can recognize a fear, I want to try and dissipate it. I want to try and face it. I want to try and go into it. So I was jumping into the fire as a hospice volunteer. And my first patient died in my arms. And with her went many of my fears because it was nothing like I imagined. Nothing like I imagined. There was sadness, but there was something that's unspeakable that happened. Something that I can only describe as a sense of feeling home, a sense of it's okay, a sense of something greater than myself that just wasn't scary, it's just meant to be. So at that moment, I switched my life journey and started, I was going for my master's in my MBA because I was going to go back out. This is an important point that I didn't realize till years later. I was going to go back out and teach those managers you can manage with a heart, that you didn't have to be so pressing. You didn't have to be so uptight. It was a terrible working environment in the 80s for women, young women. So I switched from the MBA and started my path to become a psychologist. I wanted to be a clinician. I wanted to work with people at the end of life to support their path, to help them feel loved, to help them not be alone, to help them embrace this aspect of our life that is absolutely just a natural part of life. So that's part of the journey. I got my doctorate in mythology and depth psychology, and everything I did in my doctorate program was geared toward death, dying, and beyond. I studied cultures and religions and literatures from all over the world so that I could be present to death and support those at the end of life. That's just a little small segment, but my passion really is to envision a world where no one dies alone, in pain, or without love, where individuals and families and communities really grow to develop a harmonious relationship with end-of-life transitions and the grief that follows. Because what that really means is we're living life to the fullest. Often someone will say to me, "Oh, I don't want to talk about death." I said, "Good, I don't either." And they look at me sideways. No, that's what you do. And I want to talk about how you want to live until you die. That's really what it is about. Life is a process. Dying is a process. Death is an event. It's a moment in this journey. It's a moment in this journey. And from there, I worked as a hospice social worker for many years, and I loved it. Very beautiful interdisciplinary work. I deepened. I got my clinical experience. And then in the mid-90s, so I've been doing this for 35 years. I started volunteering when I was 35, when I was in my 20s. And hospice started to have a shift. The medical model of end of life started to come in. Hospice started to be run by Medicare and the insurance companies, and they had to fit a parameter of how to care. And hospice is beautiful. We collaborate with hospice, and I always team up when I'm working with families. But they were swayed into more of a box, and they lost a little bit of the heart and soul to me. And not saying every single hospice worker has the most beautiful heart and soul. A little bit of a hand tying as far as what services they can offer. When I was in hospice, I was with families all night long sometimes. as I am now. But that's not something that they can do anymore. There's really strict guidelines. In fact, what really pushed me to move was when I was told I had to see 11 patients in a day and I had 45 minutes with each patient. In my heart, it felt like, could you hurry up and die, please? That's what it felt like. And of course, I just couldn't move forward with that. And that was the birthing of the HeartWay at that particular moment. And she went on many renditions, and we became a nonprofit 5 years ago this month. And we serve people with end-of-life transitions, their caregivers and loved ones. And our focus of providing end-of-life care, counseling, education, advocacy, ministry, and programs to help ease the challenges that arise from dying and death and the grief that follows. And no family ever gets charged. That's a really important thing in my heart. There's so much we're dealing with as we say goodbye to our loved one. And again, sometimes we're with families for many, many hours. We're donation based from that perspective. And 5 years we're still running, and my board doesn't like my business model, but it's my soul. So,
Oh, wow.
So that's a touch. I hope that wasn't too much, but that's a little bit.
No, it's fantastic. I love listening to your journey and your story. And I just wanted to mention there's a few folks watching, and I just wanted to give them a note. They're watching live. This can be an interactive session if you so choose. If you have any questions on the topic of death, dying, spirituality, I would encourage you to ask them. We'll be fielding them. And this isn't just me and Dr. Deerheart. This is an inclusive as well. So I invite you to participate. Okay, so you talked a little bit about some of the cultural stigma surrounding death, particularly in the Western culture. It's we have our attitudes and our fears surrounding death and bereavement. My experience has been, with my background, coming into Ayurveda and to coming into Jyotish, which is Vedic astrology, and being exposed to that culture, I've seen the differences in our cultural approach towards death. They tend to embrace death as part of life, and even in the Buddhist cultures, different civilizations, they tend to have very different attitudes. In the West, it's like, let's put our blinders on and not chat about it as much. Can you talk a little bit more based on your experience on the observations surrounding these differences between the East and West, and how they've influenced your practice?
Absolutely, absolutely. And just as the word East and West is different, so is our cultural milieu, our cultural mythologies, our cultural philosophies, and the whole orientation on the development of our consciousness is real different. This is an important perspective to look at. In Western culture, we live with a model of duality: right, wrong, good, bad, yes, no. In Eastern philosophy, in Eastern consciousness, it's more of a pluralistic perspective. You have yes, no, but you have everything in between, right, wrong, and everything in between. I kind of put up this little right, wrong, these boundaries, these pluralistic or even fundamental holdings right here. And life really happens in the middle. Mm-hmm. Do we really know a yes? Do we really know a no? Do we really know a good? Do we really know a bad? So that's a fundamental difference right there in Eastern and Western. And that's some of the foundation. And this is a huge, long conversation, but just to put a few things, little jewels out there, I hope. And that's the fundamental difference with Eastern and Western. So you think about it, in Western, sometimes we have a very hard time imagining what happens after we die. after we die. And in Eastern philosophy, that is weaved so beautifully into the tapestry of life. There is a strong belief, there is a strong faith in the afterlife, whether it's reincarnation, whether it's the bardos from a Tibetan Buddhist standpoint. So people in Eastern culture live their whole life with that perspective, and it forms how they live. I'll give one example in Eastern tradition, besides what I just did with Tibetan Buddhism, and it is in Buddhism that, and other Eastern traditions, that they practice dying every day. What does that look like? Often it's in meditation, often it's in prayer, practicing surrendering the ego, and practicing dying. So that, which means surrendering, really surrendering our knowledge, surrendering our sense of knowing, our sense of right and wrong, and connecting with a divine energy, connecting with their God source. And in doing that, their goal is so that they're ready to meet it. I think about playing the piano, learning how to play the piano. When you sit down to the piano for the first time, it's a, oh my, and you make some noise. Okay. And you start practicing, and you start practicing, and you start practicing. And soon you make beautiful, beautiful music. This from the practice. You're prepared when you step into that piano. There's a relationship with it. Your fingers and your muscles and your fingers and your hands and your wrist and your arms have muscle memory, and there's a remembrance of that. That's one of the reasons I believe, one of many reasons why the practice of dying is very, very supportive to our comfort, very, very supported to our faith and belief system, and very, very supportive in diffusing our fears. When you're based in a culture that has more of a denial system, as we do here in the United States, and please, there's so many exceptions to what I'm saying, so I'm generalizing, and it's so dangerous. But I think everybody might agree that that's kind of weaves through our culture, from the scientific model, the medical model, and even some of the religious models. So when we have an opportunity to practice, when we have an opportunity to touch, when we have an opportunity to be present, we can use COVID as a great example of that right now. And first of all, may I pause for a minute to just set my heart warmth and centering to all of you around the world, whoever is listening, those of you that are being touched and challenged with COVID, and loved ones either have lost loved one or suffering from COVID. Please know you're being loved and held, and again, reach out if there's any support you can use, but I hold you in my heart prayers. So thank you. It's just called to.
Oh, wow. It's true. I mean, we're some of us, I mean, we're all in different parts of the world. We're all in different stages of recovery, but and lockdown in some cases, but I don't think there's one person around the world that hasn't been affected by this pandemic. And so I think it's really important. This is a time where the world needs healing, the world needs prayers. So thank you for stating that. I'd like to kind of piggyback on that conversation and relay a personal story, if I can, as a practitioner of Vedic astrology, and even in Ayurveda too. We're taught very specific protocols about how to approach death, and some of them do tie into that the Eastern approach, and some of them are things that have been incorporated on top of what we already know. Case in point, I met my teacher, one of my teachers, who is an Ayurvedic doctor and a Jyotishi from Bangalore. My very first meeting with him, he told me the the circumstances of my death and the rough timing of my death. And for me, coming from a Western background, I was like, at first I was kind of shocked. But eventually, I became comforted by it, because it's like, well, okay, if there is any validity to what he has predicted, I think I can come to terms with that. I could be at peace with that. And in one case in particular, where I was doing a Jyotish reading for, it was a gentleman, it was a few years ago, I noted that he had a very strong astrological period of bereavement and anger. And I touched on it, not necessarily realizing what I was doing. And they actually acknowledged in the reading, yeah, they had lost, I think it was their mother, and, there was a lot of pain for them. So I'm certain there are similar stories, with people, doing palliative care in Ayurveda as well. So as practitioners of these Eastern traditions, how can we better aid, people that are either approaching death, or, or, families that are in grieving, or, how can we, what can we do as light workers, as, bringers of healing, provide, like, what can we do for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it piggybacks off of what we were just talking about. And I was going to share a little bit more about the Western denial systems. But as you were sharing, I really was just filled with this to share with everybody before I say anything else. The most important thing that we can do for our clients, for our loved ones, for someone that's grieving, for someone that's dying, for someone that's fearful of death, is truly, very simply, be present. Honestly, all we really need is to be held, is to be loved, and is to feel compassion. Truly. At the end of life, and I will add for that matter, during our lives, the most important aspect is love. I know that sounds so trite, but it's so true. At the end of life, nobody cares what's going on politically. Nobody cares what they didn't get to buy, what they didn't do. It's really what matters is how they loved, how they feel love, how they share love, how they incorporate love in their life. And in many Eastern traditions, when the last thing on our minds is what we take with us beyond. And we want to take that love with us. And the other beauty of that is love is eternal. Love doesn't die. Love transforms, as we know, throughout our life, but love never dies. So just saying that, I hope that relaxes everybody about, oh, I've got to know all this stuff or anything. No, just be you and crack your heart open and be present to what's in the room. That's the first thing. And as you shared, and if you do nothing else, you're doing so much for your clients. Nobody really likes to talk about death. People are afraid. People are afraid. And there's so many ingredients to this fear of death. And that's a whole other conversation we can do. But being present with them and exploring first, what is their beliefs? What is their fear before we jump in? Even in Vedic astrology, you have so many jewels to share with people. So if you run across something in someone's charts that might take their breath away, like, oh, by the way, you're going to die on this date and you're going to die like this, could be like dropping an atomic bomb on someone. So you explore with them. Tell me, how do you feel about this life and death? Is death something you fear? Is death something that's been incorporated in your family? Has anybody near you died? Then you start to get a feel, oh, they're pretty open-minded and they've touched on this before, they've explored it. And then there's an opportunity to ask, do you want to know the trajectory of your life? You know, from your chart, we get some readings. Is that something you want to know or not? And be open to what your clients are needing and wanting. I think that's the greatest gift, and it comes back around to the first thing that I said about being present in love and compassion. I think the hardest thing as a practitioner, whether you're an astrologist, a caregiver, a doctor, a nurse, a psychologist, a death doula, an end-of-life practitioner, I think the hardest thing to do is to walk in to your client, have your client step into your room, and for you to be an empty tabula rasa, to be able to receive what someone's bringing forth. We often layer on a little bit of who we are, but the more we can pull back from that, the more we reduce the transference and countertransference. The transference, actually, the countertransference always will happen. The more we can reduce that, we're going to be able to see, hear, and feel who's in front of us. And that's more than half of our work in serving them, meeting them where they're at. And it's no different at end of life.
You know, it's so beautiful. I think, you know, it boils down to, as service providers that, you know, we're performing seva for people, we tend to want to bring whatever our skill set, you know, whether it's Ayurveda, whether it's, you know, natural medicine, whether it's astrology, whether it's, it doesn't matter. We just want to bring our skill set to take, because we feel that's how we are of greatest, you know, use towards the individual or individuals. But at the end of the day, like everything, it just seems like it's not so much about doing, it's just about being. And I thank you for that reminder, because it's very beautiful.
You're welcome. And that's it's very hard to just be in a culture that's all about doing. And that's the difference, one of the other differences between East and Western. Eastern isn't all about doing. They have a lot of being weaved into their lives in their day. And you also brought up something else, if I might comment, related. Sure. About all these tools and all these jewels and all this information we want to impart on someone. And that's part of our passion and our gifts that we bring to people. But we might want to ask ourselves the question, are we serving ourselves or others? Okay. Doesn't matter what we have in here. If someone's not ready to receive it, or if it would be overwhelming to receive. It matters what your clients, what your patients are needing and desiring. And there's points where you educate and you share information, of course.
Yeah.
But when we're connected in the ways we've been talking about, it will flow and the compassion will be present, and the receiver will be able to receive with greater depth and heart. And that will give it its greatest ability to heal and transform.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You know, this sort of segues into something that we sort of already talked about, but I'd like to touch on a little bit more, if that's okay. You know, when we are providing care, when we are being in the present for that person, when we are just simply coming from a heart-centered place to just be there for them, and, you know, of course, serve them however we can. When we are confronted with our own, you know, like cultural lens, which, again, you know, I've lost, you know, in the early 2000s, I lost my sister and my father almost back to back due to prolonged illness. It was, you know, it was a challenging period. And if that really forced me to examine my own feelings on mortality. And, you know, of course, I still acknowledge that I have fear towards dying. So I guess my question is, how can I help other people while I am still struggling with my own fear of mortality, like, because every time I talk about death, I almost have this feeling that there's beautiful peace, there's beauty to dying, but there's an incredible amount of weight and gravity, and that feeling of grief comes back too. So like I'm dealing with all these conflicting emotions. So so yeah, I guess that's a long question, but I'm curious to know your opinion.
No, it's beautiful, and it's a brilliant question for us to all contemplate. I'm just writing an end-of-life practitioner training program that'll be released next year, although this month on our new website when it comes out. And there's lots of training programs out there, but I really wanted to put something out that might integrate things in a different way, bring in mythology and bring in clinical skills and bring in the heart and soul. And the first thing that I believe, I'm only sharing that because it fits into your comment and question of, I'm sharing that because to be a practitioner in any field, but especially end of life, because that's what we're talking about here, you have had to be able to face your own mortality first. Otherwise, you're projecting out onto your clients your fears, your biases. And the only reason that's so important is then you get in the way of the therapeutic relationship and you really stop seeing fully who's in front of you. And that's related to my comment of being an empty tabula rasa, an empty vessel to be able to receive what's coming forth. So I really encourage you all to do your work and face your mortality. It doesn't mean you have to be all over your fears. That may not happen. But to be able to touch it and be able to touch it. And can I share a program we have that might be helpful? Joey, is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely, please.
I'm not so big on promotion. I'd rather talk the heart and soul, but there's a great, in November at Integral Yoga in San Francisco, California, but it's all online, so anybody in the world can do it now, is a 3-day workshop called Graceful Transitions. And I created this for just this conversation, helping us develop a harmonious relationship with life and death and with our mortality. And when we can do that, and it's a beautiful experiential weekend. I'm putting that adjective, sorry. I find it beautiful because it's so heart-centered and we're really brushing on our mortality. We're really facing what those fears are and work through them. I promise you won't leave depressed or sad. I promise you'll leave inspired. And the testimonies are really beautiful on how it just helped them get comfort. I wish there was something like that for me when I was a little girl to help me face and brush on it. You know, my love mom died a couple months ago, and she was very fearful of death. And I was in the hospital with her the week before she came home and before she died. She died a couple days after she came home. I was holding her hand, and she said to me, you know, I don't know how to do this. She said many things, but this was one that struck me. I don't know how to do this. And these moments, Marie, I want you to know, take my breath away. They just clutch at my heart because I feel the fear. I feel the pain that people are going through. And I don't want to fix it, but I want to love them and support them and give them the ability to look at these fears and work through them, which they do. And I said to her, I said, you know, nobody knows how to do this. We do this once. We only go through this once, but we can go through it together. And tell me what you don't want to do, what you want to do. And that led into a conversation that helped support her. And she said, what do I do when I get home? She had made a decision to come home on hospice care. And I said, we live. How would you like to do that? What would you like to do? What feels important to you right now in your life? She gave me a list of things that we're going to do. Wonderful. We can go out to lunch. I don't have to stay home. No, she didn't have the energy, and she died a couple days later after she got home. But it gave her the reframing to look at really what was in front of her. And that was allowed her to work through her fears and be present in what do I need to do before I die? What do I want to do? And the most important was her grandchildren and my niece and nephew. And one was able to come, one was on the East Coast, but we were able to have sacred special time with her. So it's really important for us to touch our fears, to touch our denial systems. There's a lot in the way of that. We live in a culture that's founded on an anti-aging myth. And how do you die if you can't age? It's just not a possibility. So we have a lot of pressures coming through us. What I can promise you, I won't give you many promises, but what I can promise you is that if you take some time to face the reality of this finite life, you will expand your humanity. You will expand your ability to live this life. I'm often asked, and on our new website, it'll be up on a blog if you want to read more, how could you do this work? Isn't it depressing? And my flip response is, I cannot not do this work. In yoga terms, it's my dharma. It's what I'm been called to, and I'm on my knees with gratitude for this opportunity. One of the things that it gives me personally is an undying gratitude for each breath that I take, because I absolutely know it is a gift. And I know my life will end. And at times, sometimes there's still a fear bubble with it. That inspires me to live as consciously as I can, to live in as much love as I can. That's my other dharma, is love. And to be a human, to be a mother that my daughter can be proud of, to walk softly on this earth and leave no trail. I'm often asked, is Deerheart your real name? And it is. It's my legal name, but it was given to me after a Native American vision quest. And that's my spirit name, Deerheart. What's so special about it to me is deer medicine is about walking softly on this earth and gentle healer. Okay? So that is my intention every day as I walk. And as I hold thousands of people at the end of their lives, it also teaches me that this life is finite and that I want to make as much as I can count. I don't want to put a delusion out there. I have tough days. I have very tough days. I have days I forget. I have days I forget. But that's my intention. And being with people at the end of life absolutely inspires my life to its fullest.
What an amazing reminder for all of us. And, thank you so much for bringing that forward, that
My pleasure.
we can cultivate that idea of, living life to the fullest, so that, we have that completeness within us, and really living from the heart and in a fully conscious way. So I thank you for bringing that forward and mentioning it. And, I too am not one for, promotions and that kind of thing, but I would be remiss to not mention that, I originally met you through Yoga Nidra, and I'm sure I have a few folks that are watching today that, they've either participated in my classes or come to my Yoga Nidra workshops. And so just so just so we're clear, I received Yoga Nidra training through the California College of Ayurveda through Dr. Mark Halpern, who's also your beloved partner. And I attended a 4-day training at Shivananda Ashram in California, which was just near Nevada City. And then there was an additional optional component to the course, which was called Yoga Nidra Graceful Transitions. So just for the listeners who don't necessarily know about Yoga Nidra, we won't really go too much into that, except to say it's a yogic practice wherein a person lies completely still, and through guided progressive relaxation, they go to deeper and deeper states of awareness where they're as if their physical body is asleep, but their mind is awake and aware, and they're fully aware and able to project that beautiful sankalpa and energy into the world, into healing, or into whatever intention that they want to take that energy towards. But with this additional workshop, I just want to share my experience, if I can, for Yoga Nidra Graceful Transitions. I think there was a lot of people that attended the Yoga Nidra, and then the Graceful Transitions, there was only a few people. I think part of that had to do maybe with the fear, or and it was really interesting because I remember walking in and the energy had shifted on the day of Graceful Transitions. The music was different as we walked in, and I felt like I had an emotional release at that point. Like it was like, and we talked about a lot about what we're talking about today, and we got to explore that topic a little bit more through the context of shifting our Yoga Nidra practice towards the intention of assisting people who are either in the stages of dying or going through bereavement, or that kind of thing, where they're actually bringing that awareness to that level of energy. And so I just wanted to talk about Yoga Nidra as a practice, if I can, and graceful transitions, and how that, the adoption of that tool in your practitioner toolkit, and developing and working with that, how that has positively impacted your practice as an end-of-life care practitioner.
Oh, I'd be happy to, and thank you. It was so sweet to have you part of that training, and I really love that they're intimate classes, to be honest, because we get an opportunity to work with ourselves as well as our professions. So. You described Yoga Nidra Graceful Transitions so beautifully, so beautifully. One thing I would add, if I might, is the practice is also good for everybody, especially those of us that fear death, because it gives us an opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, to imagine. It gives us an opportunity to imagine a peaceful transition. It gives us an opportunity to leave our bodies pain-free, being surrounded by love and compassion. And you start to visualize what this might be like. And it is very peaceful, and it is very grounding. So in our practice at the HeartWay, I offer Yoga Nidra Graceful Transition workshops as well, where I work with individuals. Right now, COVID style is Zoom rooms, and it's beautiful and powerful. People can be in their own homes, so there's a sweetness about that as well. And I also work with my end-of-life clients with Yoga Nidra Graceful Transitions. Either they have my CD, or they download it, or I do an individual personal practice with them. And this is what I've noticed from the practice. A few things. Yoga Nidra itself, the difference between Yoga Nidra and Graceful Transition is this. The Yoga Nidra is a state of consciousness versus a practice, as some of us know. And there's different practices that help us get into the state of consciousness where we learn how to master the world we live in. Yoga Nidra Graceful Transition is no different. The difference is the sankalpa, where we set our attention, where we set our visualization of the world we want to master, and we focus it on transitions. So this is good for all kinds of transitions, and the intention of doing it with grace means for me Grace is a movement of fluidity, is honoring all that flows in these transitions. You talked about death being beautiful, and it is. It's also messy, and it's also painful, and it often can be tragic. That's part of the grace. It's weaved into the story and the narrative of grace. So Graceful Transitions is about helping us work through those fears. But we also know about Yoga Nidra through all the empirical data that there's incredible physiological benefits to it. My favorite one for most of us is Yoga Nidra is equivalent to about 3 hours. An hour of Yoga Nidra is equivalent to about 3 hours of sleep. So the body gets an incredible rest. And whether you're working, raising kids, and or sick and or dying, we're pretty exhausted. So it's a really beautiful boost and rest, even more restful than sleep, because there's a part of our consciousness that is awake during sleep. Mm-hmm. So Yoga Nidra Graceful Transition also is being used for pain in cancer centers, pain control, and anxiety, all kinds of anxiety from PTSD to anxiety that comes along with different illnesses. So Yoga Nidra Graceful Transition has been beautiful in supporting people with pain, supporting people with anxiety and with fears. Without a doubt, after each practice, and it deepens and deepens with more practice, there is a sense of relief. There is a sense of hope. And it's just beautiful. My fantasy, and someone says, stop saying fantasy, it'll happen, is that all the hospices give out a recording of Yoga Nidra Graceful Transition to all their patients. So in the middle of the night, when pain's out of control and they're waiting for a hospice nurse to get there, which takes time, they can pop on the CD and get a little bit of relief until the nurse gets there. That's my fantasy, that will be a gift. And I'm working with a couple hospices on that now. But it is a beautiful tool, not only for those at the end of life, but also their families and caregivers. Everybody can do it together because caregivers are pretty exhausted. That's the nature of being a caregiver. Caregiving is giving up of self. It's the only way to be a caregiver. It's very hard to reclaim that, and it's very exhausting. So Yoga Nidra is a beautiful boost for that. So you mentioned it as a tool. It's just become a beautiful tool in my little Mary Poppins bag to support families on the ever-evolving journey at the end of life with a loved one, especially now during this worldwide pandemic when we're separated from our loved ones. There's new layers of grief and anxiety that's weaved in that. It's very hard not to say goodbye. It's very hard not to be with someone that we love that is suffering. Mm-hmm. This is another tool for everybody to get some relief. I want to share a little story. I did a Yoga Nidra Graceful Transition Zoom session for an organization in Southern California that I've worked with for years. And there were about 15 elders on this Zoom call from age probably 70 to 90 something. And this is the first time they were doing Yoga Nidra Graceful Transitions. So I got them, educated them. We did our practice, and then we came back for an intimate circle to hear what that was like for them. And one woman who probably had some layer of cognitive challenges, some level of dementia, she comes on, big-eyed afterwards, and said, "Can we do this again tomorrow?" It doesn't even matter. And I've done Yoga Nidra with Alzheimer's clients. It doesn't matter what happened. I don't know what happened on their journey. And it matters not. Mm-hmm. But what mattered was she was feeling light and beautiful and wanted to do it again. Mission accomplished. A little sharing of love, a little sharing of relief, a little sharing of rest for the body, mind, and spirit. So it's a beautiful tool. I fell in love with it when I trained a few years ago with Dr. Halpern. And it just was like, do you know those moments in life when the light bulbs go on and there's fireworks and lightning? It was like, oh my gosh, this is such a beautiful tool for those at the end of life and their families, those of us fearing death. And it's so accessible. Where meditation takes a lot more discipline and time and patience, you're just there in that state of yoga nidra, and something is healing, even if we don't know what it is. So it's been beautiful. I'm so thrilled to teach it and be part of that practice.
That's wonderful. And if anyone, down the road is watching this video, I would encourage you to look into the Yoga Nidra training offered through the California College of Ayurveda, and definitely say yes to the extra days training with Dr. Deerheart, because you will not be disappointed.
2 days now.
Yes. So, well, I just want to ask, in closing, if folks feel compelled towards your cause, how they can find out more about the HeartWay and your life's work. I know you have you currently have a website, but as of today of recording this, it's under reconstruction. But can you tell us how to reach you, how to get in touch with you?
Sure, absolutely. And please don't hesitate. If you have any questions or concerns around death, dying, and beyond, reach out. I'm more than happy to be present and support you and supply resources. So I mean that from my heart. That's what inspires me. So you can find us. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. It's theheartway.org. The website's up. You won't even know it's under construction. We're doing it all behind the scenes. But this next month, there'll be a new one coming up that I'm very excited about. Websites are a lot of work. I'm so humbled by it, but thrilled to put this creation out there in a way that feels accessible to everybody. So you've got Facebook, and we always respond to messages. You've got the website, and you can email me at Deerheart, my last name, at theheartway.org. That's simple enough to remember. And one other tool for you, we do lives on Facebook too, and all kinds of programming. All of them are free. Some of the classes are not, and they go to help support our work. But everything's tax deductible, which is sweet. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. And I want to remind you about the Death Cafe, because it came up so much today about the conversation and fears. And so we do 2 Death Cafes a month. One's on Zoom, which is a lot more intimate. You're welcome to do that one. They're all on our Facebook page, and one is a Facebook Live, and they're both the last week of the month. So you're welcome to join that. And it's just like this. It's a conversation. But you on Facebook Live enter questions and comments, and I work with your concerns. I've done Death Cafes for about 8 years, and they're usually in person in a circle. I always serve chocolate and tea, and we have a conversation, and people bring into the circle what's on their mind. In 8 years, none of them has ever been the same conversation, sometimes the same topic. But and about fear, one last quote for you in contemplation is, I wonder, is it the fear of the unknown that we're afraid of, or the fear of the known going away? I'll say that one more time. Are we fearful of the unknown, or are we fearful of the known going away or leaving us?
Wow. That's a wonderful quote. Thank you so much. I just wanted to give a shout out. We had a couple of comments here, and I just go through them quickly. Lisbeth from Facebook, good friend of mine, Lisbeth Freganese, great topic, so true. And I also have Heather as well. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. And definitely, I also mirror Heather and Lisbeth as well in saying, I just appreciate you so much as a bringer of light into this world that needs healing. And you give of yourself so freely to, towards people like me, and coming on our channel today and just, chatting. And thank you so much, Dr. Deerheart. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my honor completely. Thank you. And please, everybody, be well, be love, and be you. My heart to yours.
Thank you. Take care.